ADPTR Audio Sculpt. Is it a game changer? Hi, welcome to the Crates Motel. My name's Conan. In today's video, we're going to be looking at ADPTR Audio's Broadband Dynamics plugin, Sculpt. Now, Sculpt is a really deep plugin, so I'm not going to be going into the science too much. Anybody that watches my videos knows that I'm more about how the plugin will sound rather than what it does in Plugin Doctor. So let's jump in. So here we are in Studio One. We've got Sculpt open. Now, there's 4 separate modules. But before we get into the modules, I'm just going to explain the auto gain, the master, controls along here, that kind of thing, the visual references, that kind of thing. So obviously we have a master section, mix section here, so you can control how much of the processing is audible. Mid side here as well. We have the auto gain section here, which I'm going to explain in a second. Along the bottom here, we have presets. You can change how it looks. You can change the size of it. You have the ABCD here where you can copy and paste and compare different versions. You can enable and disable the transient section here, which does actually change the latency. You can see by having that off and on. Sidechain, you can have external or internal. Oversampling obviously goes up to 8. I leave it on 2 most of the time, but I will switch just to see if there's any kind of difference, if it sounds better or sounds worse. Sometimes I found that 8 does sound nice, especially on masters which have a lot of low end. But that's not default. That's not going to be the case for every single low end master. So really flick between them, try them out, see which you think sounds best. And then here, obviously, we have the latency. Now you can see there's a lot of latency. This is not a plugin that I would use live, recording a vocal or anything like that. Now, with the bypass, because of the latency, if you use the bypass in your DAW, I'm speaking about Studio One here because I haven't tried it in any other DAW, so it might not be the case. But in Studio One, if you use the bypass, there's quite a delay. It sounds like a glitch, and it's a little bit off-putting. I'm used to it, to be honest with you, because I do use some quite old 32-bit plugins still, which actually do that, so it doesn't really bother me that much. But if you use the bypass on the actual plugin, you don't get that at all. So I've just got used to using the bypass on the plugin. There's no delay, you don't even notice. And with the auto gain, which is so good, there is no difference in the volume at all. You're not fooled. You can literally listen to the track bypassed and then drop in the plugin, no change in volume, and you can hear exactly what the plugin is actually doing to the audio. It's one of the best one of the best auto gains that I've used on a plugin so far. I would love it if every single one of my plugins had this auto gain. So I'm just going to show you how to use it. It's very simple. You literally switch on the auto gain and you analyze the audio for as long as you feel you need to analyze it for. And then you just leave it after that and you can bypass with the master bypass here. So let's just analyze the audio. That's probably fine. And now when I switch on and off, you're not going to hear any difference. Now, obviously at the moment, you're not going to hear any difference at all because I'm not actually doing any processing. So once we get into the modules, I'll show you the auto gain in action. So let's just quickly explain the visual references we have here. Now at the top, we have kind of like this is the compression area, I guess you'd call it. And it shows you the waveform and it will show you the gain reduction and the gain increase. And if I remember rightly, orange shows you the gain increase and blue shows you the gain reduction. And down here, it shows you attenuation and boost. And this is more of a waveform kind of visual reference that you would have on an EQ, like say Fab Filter, something like that. And you also have some controls that you can change that here. So if I just show you. So now you can see the gain reduction and the gain increase with the blue and the orange. I think that's meant to be orange. I think I heard the guy from ADPTR Audio, Adam, say it was brown. It looks orange to me. I might be colorblind. And then down here, like I said, it's more of a waveform that you would have on an EQ. You have absolute and you have relative. Relative shows you the actual changes, like on something like Gullfoss, if you've used Gullfoss before. Then you have fast, slow, medium, and mid and side. Really, really good visual references. You know, you shouldn't just rely on visual references, but as visual references do go, these are really, really good in my opinion. Down in the sidechain EQ that you have for the compressors, you have a shelf, you have a peak, you have a high shelf, and you have a tilt. If you hold down control on a PC, it zeros everything, which is really useful. Zero. Great stuff. Love that. Over here, you can drag side to side, change the ranges. Here, this is a readout for the gain reduction globally, gain increase globally, and you can change the range of it globally with this, if it will just work. There we go. I'll explain a little bit more what that does later on when I get into the modules. And over here, you have an RMS readout, which you can switch between left and right stereo and mid and side. Also, if I remember rightly, yeah, if you click on it, you solo, which is also a really, really cool thing that isn't in every single plugin and probably should really be, because it's just really, really handy to not have to have another plugin to be able to just solo the side information or the mid information, etc. So let's get into how it sounds. That's why we're here. We're going to start off with the downward compressor, which can also be switched to upward expander. Nice little addition there. And it's, you know, it has the controls of your regular compressor, tack release, threshold ratio, knee, a couple of little extra things, which I'll explain, makeup, mid-side processing, all really, really great to have on a compressor. For me, it's quite a transparent compressor. It doesn't add character the way an analog emulation compressor would. That's great. That can have its uses. You know, sometimes you do really, really need transparent compression. So it's great for that. But if you really want a character compressor, probably not the compressor that I would personally reach for. So let's have a listen to what it sounds like. Now, that was the compressor without the attack and release section turned on. Now, when you have the compressors without the attack and release turned on, it's done on a sample by sample basis, as far as I'm aware. So it's very, very quick, very good at catching peaks, and a nice addition, actually, to be able to choose to do that on a compressor. With the attack and release on, you have the standard controls that you would have on a compressor. Let's just set this to what I would have on a G bus. See how fast you can actually have it. So I've got it 1 millisecond, 30 milliseconds. And then let's take that back to about 2. You see, for me, it affects the transients very, very quickly. It rounds them off very, very quickly, even at low settings. So if you listen to what the snare does. So I'll put it into, I'll have the plugin on, then I'll go into bypass. Those settings on an SSL would let through the transient of the snare drum. This is affecting them a little bit, even at low settings. But obviously, you can change the knee. So that's probably going to have some sort of effect on it as well. So it still grabs them at low settings. So for me, it's very reactive. It's got a nice transparent sound to it. It can glue things very, very quickly. But if you don't want to change the transients too much, just with the compressor alone, then I wouldn't push it too far personally. Let's just push it really far just to see what it sounds like. I mean, that's ridiculous levels. You just wouldn't do that. But as you can hear, even when you push it really far, whilst you can hear that it's compressing, it's still quite transparent. So that's a really useful thing to have in a compressor sometimes if you don't want to add that character. Now, like I said, I would never push a compressor that far in mastering, obviously, and not on a mix either. But for sound design, for individual instruments, for like a bass, for instance, a vocal would be great. You could really, really push it, really get that compressed sound, but not really change the actual sound of the audio so much. Also, this range knob here will allow you to choose how much you want to gain reduce. So you can really push into compression, but choose how much you actually want to reduce the signal. Just take that right down, push it a bit. So again, a really useful tool to have on a compressor to be able to choose how much gain reduction you actually want from the compressor. Also, it's the same on the upper compressor as well. So moving on to the upper compressor, let's just turn that off. I have found personally, it's a great upper compressor, which again, you can also click here and have as a downwards expander. Like I said, I'm not going to go into everything on this plugin, so I'm not really going to look at downward expander, and I haven't looked at upwards expander on there either. I'm just going to go over the basics. There's so much to this plugin, honestly. I've been using it for a week or so, pretty much daily, and I'm still finding new things out every single time I use it. So sticking with the standard upward compression, again, it becomes obvious that you're upward compressing quite quickly. Let's really push it. You can hear how good the auto gain is when you do something like that, because there literally is no change in volume at all. So this needs to be made default on every single plugin that's released from now on, in my opinion. So obviously I've pushed that to levels that would never ever be used in a million years. So let's just bring that back a little bit. Now with the bound control, really, really useful on the upward compressor. If you want it to sound a bit more natural, the inherent problem that you have with upward compression sometimes is it can sound really sucky, because what it's doing is it's sucking up the quiet part of the signal. With this control here, you can make it sound a lot more natural. So if you say, for instance, we're using upward compression on a drum kit, there's a lot of room reverb and a lot of ambience. And if you use upward compression, you're going to drag that ambience up as well. And you don't always want that. Sometimes you do want it. Sometimes you really want that sort of pumping, sucked up, full sound on a drum kit. Sounds really, really good on breakbeats that you would sample off old funk records and stuff. I love doing it on that. That sounds amazing. And what you can do is you can push the bound knob all the way to the right, and that will suck up everything, makes it really, really sucky and sounds really cool on a drum kit. But if you want it to sound a lot more natural, take it over to the left. So again, that's another really handy addition to have on a compressor that you don't normally get. So I love that little addition from ADPTR Audio. It's really, really cool. So it can be subtle. Now, maybe this isn't the best track to use to really show you what the upward compressor can do. So get the plugin, try it out on multiple sources. Definitely try it out on drums. It sounds awesome, sounds great on vocals. You can really use it for sound design, the upward compressor on this. Really, really cool. Like I said, on both compressors, you can switch here. I'm not even going to pretend that I've used them very much, because like I said, this is a real learning curve for me as well using this plugin. There's loads of stuff that you can do with it. So I wanted to really dial down, know exactly what was going on with the upward compressor and downward compressor before I started playing around with the additional parts to it. This is another great addition as well. I love being able to just affect the mid and side. Obviously, also down below, we have the sidechain EQ, where you can, change what parts of the frequency you want to affect the compressor, so you can make sure there's no low end affecting the compression. You could use this for de-essing, so you could pick your frequency. Awesome. Tilt, brilliant. High shelf. I mean, it's just, as a sidechain EQ, again, the adapter's just absolutely nailed it. It's brilliant. I love it. And having it in this relative mode when you're doing that as well. I find this readout really, really useful. It's on Golfos has a similar readout, and there's a couple other plugins now that have this kind of readout. And I love it. I have it in absolute most of the time, but switching it to that for certain things, really, really useful. So let's now look at the tone sculpt tilt, tone sculpt tilt. Obviously, clicking on it, turning it on, you have the additional controls here, which I'll explain in a moment. Now, it's not really an EQ. You would think it is an EQ. You hear the expression tilt EQ quite a lot, but it isn't really. It's more a broad tone sculptor would be the way that I would describe it. So, for instance, you can rebalance the overall tone of your source. So, it's good to have it in relative mode for this, actually. So let's just play some of the signal. You can see the relative here. It's really, really handy, especially in the tone tilt. Now, what's going to be useful here with the tone tilt, for instance, is using mid-side to create kind of a bit of an expansion. very subtly opens things up. So again, you can use it sound design, use it in a master, be a bit more subtle, obviously. Really, really nice. Now with the detail, what it does, let's just zero that back again. What the detail does is it boosts resonant tones, basically. So you can, well, it's probably the best thing to do would be to show you. You can hear it mostly on the snare drum, so if you concentrate on the snares. Now obviously, again, I'm pushing this further than I would normally push it. So you can hear it kind of sculpts the overall tone is the purpose of it. It's not, you know, an EQ, a surgical EQ of any sort, or even a broad stroke EQ. It's more about a broad kind of sculpting of the overall sound of the track. Tilt EQs are actually really, really useful in mastering, and they're not talked about perhaps as much as they should be. Maybe it's us mastering engineers like to think we have little secret weapons, and tilt EQ is a little bit of a secret weapon. And you can sometimes, if used in the right way and the crossovers in the right point, you can take a really, you say you get sent a really, really good mix, but there's just something about it that's not quite right. It just needs this minimal brightening up slightly, or you know, I mean, you can see what I'm doing. You tilt, and it's a subtle thing, but sometimes tilting in just the right place can just make that 95% track into a 150% track. Obviously, I sound like Simon Cowell now because there isn't more than 100%. It doesn't exist, but it takes it over the top. It takes it, you know, into gold area. And it literally is just a tiny bit of subtle tilt EQ. And it's something that I use quite a lot with FabFilter. Their tilt EQ is really, really good. But I have started using this in a similar way because I like being able to, certainly being able to mid-side, brilliant. The detail doesn't always work how I want it to work, but it has some interesting results sometimes, which I wouldn't expect. So I'm not saying for a moment that I completely understand what this is doing. It sounds like it's doing resonant, it's a maybe with harmonics, maybe resonant frequencies or some sort. I don't really know exactly what's going on underneath the hood, and I haven't run it through Plugin Doctor, so you're welcome to see what it does. But the tilt EQ on this is very good, and I think it might be one of the modules that people might overlook and might think, oh, I don't really want to use that. It doesn't really do much, but it actually does. It's really, really good. Try it on bass guitars. Really good on bass guitar tilt EQ, and you know, and obviously try it on the mix. Maybe not on the mix bus. Probably not such a good idea. But rules made to be broken. Try it on a mix bus by all means. But in mastering, I have used it. I used it for a client last week, and their mix was nails, really, really good. But it just needed a bit of brightening up, and I didn't want to use an EQ to push the top end, and I also didn't really want to affect the low end too much. But this tone tilt gave it the balance that I wanted, and it worked on that particular source. Not saying it'll work on every source. So yeah, use this, try it out. It's really, really cool. Really, really like it. It's probably, weirdly enough, one of my favorite modules. So let's just turn that off and let's get onto the transient design. Now the transient design, I love transient designing. It's something that I've used more and more over the last 3 or 4 years. And more plugins are coming out which have got really, really good transient designers on them. I still reach for SPL Transient Designer virtually every single mix. But I am starting to branch out a little bit and started using other transient designers a bit more. And this transient designer is especially good. Now, really the best way to show you how good this transient designer for me is going to be just to play you a track, play you this song here, and show you what it can do. Now, everyone has their own opinion on what good is. What I love, or maybe what I might hate about this transient designer, is it's so natural sounding that I have pushed it quite far and then kind of forgotten that it's even on, and really, really like the sound of the track, and then taken the transient designer out and the mix has just completely fallen to pieces. So I mean, is that a good thing or a bad thing? You decide. But it's so natural sounding. It's one of the most natural sounding transient designers I've used. They've really nailed it. I would buy it as a plugin on its own. In fact, thinking about it, I would probably buy all of these as separate modules. But the transient designer especially, I would buy this as a separate module. It's just so good, in my opinion. So let's play around with it. So obviously you can hear there how that's affecting the snares most of all, and what I love about it is it just sounds so natural. It's obviously affecting the transients of the snares, but if you hadn't heard the bypass version, which obviously you're not going to if you're a person listening to the track, you wouldn't know kind of how soft the Simmons snare drum was, but how naturally this transient designer has brought out like the punch and the transient of the snare drum. Now, it might not work, I mean, obviously I've pushed this quite far. It might not necessarily make the track sound better, but I really just want to show you what it can do. But it just sounds so natural to me. That's the real thing that I would really say about this particular transient designer, is how natural it sounds. So there you have it. Now, I'm not really quite sure whether this video was a review, whether it was just me messing about with the plugin or showing you what the plugin could do. I just hope that you got something out of it and you go and demo the plugin yourself. Try it out on as many sources as possible. Don't just try it out on the mix bus or masters. It's a very versatile plugin. Is it a game changer? There's that phrase that everyone throws around at the moment, game changer. For me personally, yes, it's a game changer, but it's not going to be a game changer for everybody. It's not a plugin that you can blag. It's not a plugin that you can just stick on a source, twist a few knobs, and everything sounds amazing. I would say it's not even a plugin that you can just choose a preset and it works either. You really have to know it back to front. You have to really get involved. You have to make a ton of mistakes. You have to try it out on a ton of sources and just disappear down a rabbit hole, mess things up, and learn it. That's really the only way it will be a game changer for you. So if you're not prepared to do that, that's cool, but it's probably not going to be a game changer for you. I love having a plugin where I have upward and downward compression. The tone tilt is amazing. The transient designer is the most natural sounding transient designer I've ever used. It's a plugin in itself. Having all of those modules in one plugin, the little extras, even the stupid things like having a built-in where you can just click and solo the mid or solo the side, or just having a plugin that has that, for me, I love that. The auto gain obviously is amazing. Yeah, try it out. It's definitely one of those plugins you just got to try it out for yourself, and it's not going to be for everybody, but I absolutely love it. It's going to be a game changer for me, and I hope it is for you too. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more mixing and mastering tutorials and reviews. This is the Crates Motel. My name's Conan. Till next time.